Next Up here on Donnybrook, Alvin, Reid, Wendy, Wiese, and three people who really and truly need no introduction to St. Louis viewers. Don Marsh.
Hello.
Donn Johnson. And
Hi,
Betsey Bruce joining us tonight to talk about local news, past and present. First of all, you all look great.
Thank you.
Thank you. But you knew that, right?
She told me she was going to do that. Right.
You knew I had to do that.
I think I got to leave now.
No. Share with our viewers right off the bat what you're up to now, because you are like the modern day local Louis L'Amour. You are so prolific writing. You've got a new book called The Fabulist.
If I could only sell one or two of them, then things would just be perfect. Yeah, I'm keeping busy writing. I have nothing else to do. Pandemic was a great time to do something like that. I love to write. Spent my entire career writing. Spent my entire career writing facts.
Right.
Now I can make it all up.
And you are having a ball.
I'm having a ball.
And Betsey, you are writing grant applications.
I am, a little bit at a time, that's right. Helping a local charity do that.
So a different kind of writing.
It is.
But you're still writing.
But you have to have the facts right, and you have to be sure that every little question gets answered and matches the facts you put in the question 5 questions above.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then Don, you said that you are a professional putterer now, right?
Pretty much. I mean, I have plants at home that I work with, you know, and then when spring comes, I work outside, you know, and I mean, I do the old man thing. I'm sorry, that's what I've done, and that's who I am, and so, but you know, it's good. I can pick up and leave when I want to.
That's what it's all about,
yeah,
right?
So
I mean, that's why you work so hard, and you are in for a real treat tonight, our Donnybrook viewers, because of what we like to call institutional memory gathered around this table. I think, you know, we wanted to start a little bit with what your habits are when it comes to news consumption today. Betsey, we'll start with you. I mean, where do you go for your news?
Well, I consider myself a bit of a news junkie. So I spend probably way too much time trying to keep myself up to date because I really don't need to do that any longer. But I use our local television stations, primarily the one I worked for, Channel 2.
Sure.
And I rely to some degree on Fox News, like Brett Baer, or in the afternoon, Martha McCallum. And I'm upset with Fox for moving her out of the 6 p.m. spot because I like that. And then I read the Wall Street Journal and sadly what's left of the Post-Dispatch, which isn't much.
Yeah. Don?
Well, I don't watch much local television anymore. I do watch cable channels. I switch around. Don't watch much Fox, I must say, Betsey. But I use newspapers. I read 3 or 4 of them in the morning, digitally, online. And during the course of the day, I'll check with the cable channels in case something's going on, and I'm never disappointed.
DJ?
Well, my consumption, I mean, I'm an MSNBC guy. I've never hidden where my heart lies, and so I watch a lot of that, but I watch the others too, and some of it makes me want to throw up, to be honest with you. The network, locally, I watch them all for various reasons. I'm looking for someone who keeps me so interested that that's where I want to go every time the news comes up. And I'm sorry to say I haven't found that yet. I mean, I just don't see this is going to sound terrible, but no one, in my opinion, has that real star quality and where I want to watch that person every day. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's where I am. So I'm all around, and I read the newspaper. I get the Post every day, and I have a neighbor who runs, and then she's very nice. They throw it in my driveway, and when she runs by, she picks it up and puts it on my porch and keeps running.
But like I say, my wife and you could have a MSNBC watch party that went on. like she's that's her go-to place. All right, now you don't have to like name a station in particular, but just your thoughts. You kind of touched on it, Don. If you could change one thing about the local news broadcasts, what would it be?
Well, this was true when I was working. Please don't lead with crime every night.
Here, here.
I am
Here,
just
here,
up
here,
to
here.
here with it. And you may remember, since we both worked at Channel 2, and I can't remember whether Don was there at the time or not, when we had that logo, the mean streets of St.
Oh,
Louis.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that was a particular time when the homicide rate was jumping up. And that was management's idea of how we're going to draw the viewers in. And it just was more than I can handle.
Also, it's easy to cover.
Exactly.
It's, the assignment editor sits next to a police scanner all day, and they're hearing all this stuff. Plus, you can go any place in the world and cover a crime story. You got shots of yellow tape, grieving somebody, talk to a victim or whatever,
Right.
see you out of there, and you got a story. And that's what's going on.
Yeah, to add on to that, I don't like live shots in front of the police station, in front of these generic buildings. That always troubled me. It's like I don't know, like in the story Big, where the guy says, "That's a building. What fun is that?" Well, that's how I look at it. When Tom Hanks says, "What's fun? What's fun about a building? It's just there."
Or hours ago,
Yeah,
here
there's
in this
another one.
building,
Yeah,
this empty building.
And believe it or not, we've been putting up with that in our years in the business, and they're still doing it. And it's not interesting. It doesn't tell me anything, and it doesn't really make the reporter look any better.
You make an important point, Don, and that is, I think we have to be careful here of coming across as people saying, back in the day,
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
we
I
did
agree.
better. Because I'm not sure in many cases that was true. I think there were some things that we did better because they had people that were around for a long time. They had that institutional memory that you mentioned a minute ago. We're losing that all across the board in the newspapers locally, the television stations. I can't keep track anymore.
Which brings us to our next point. Was it the Washington Post, and was it during the Trump presidency, or was it during the pandemic where it was democracy dies in the darkness or something like
That's
that?
the Post.
Democracy dies in the dark. When you have this emphasis on backpack journalists, the journalists who are setting up the cameras, they're doing everything. It is certainly, at least it appears to be, a less expensive endeavor gathering the news than it was when the three of you were out there gathering the news. Are shenanigans more prevalent when you have the reporters who are so busy and thinking about their next career? Because you made your lives here, and reporters seem to be in and out and in and out today. And is that affecting the product, I guess, is my point.
Institutional memory, once again,
Yeah.
I believe. Because I have often said that if Gene McNary, God forbid, were run over by a bus tomorrow, half the town, or more than half the reporters in town, wouldn't know who the heck we were talking about.
That's right.
And he played an important role for a long time here, longest serving county executive, I think, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And, the days when he was doing his thing with Vince Shamel, for instance, were important days.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people don't remember those days
Well, they
anymore.
don't give government any
No,
they don't
sure.
give government any time at all to the people who run these operations. They think government is boring, and I think government is what this is all about. You've got to tell people what's going on. We wouldn't be in the fix we are in now if people studied government and understood what their government means and does. And I think television news is a place where you could do that, but they don't do that because they say that doesn't get the audience. You see.
Well, I'll disagree a little bit in that Channel 2 has reporters in Springfield, Illinois, and Jefferson City, Missouri, which didn't exist when I was working. I mean, I had to make that 120-mile trip and try to come back, and there were no hours on how long that poor photographer had to be driving, not like the truck driver, but after we'd worked all day to get something done. So, I mean, that's a positive, and those are corporate decisions for Channel 2. But did they cover the candidates well in the last election? I don't think so. Now, Channel 5 had a reporter who did some more in-depth interviews, I found. It varies, and I benefited from being a young person. I started right out of college at Channel 4, about a few months after I came to work there on the air. So, I don't begrudge the young people, but what I'm sorry about is after their contract is up, they are out the door.
They're gone.
And they're not staying for the most part. And I don't know what the reason is, whether they don't like St. Louis or they think that they're going to be making more money somewhere else. So many of them want to be anchors, and they really don't want to fool with being out on the street. And I was blessed to do both, so I found
we
that
all were.
energizing.
We all were.
In broadcast journalism, are you finding that the younger people are just leaving the profession altogether after their first or second job, or it's just more of a case, I'm just going to the next job wherever it is?
It's both.
It's both.
It's both. I mean, there are some young women who've stayed in St. Louis who left the stations, but others have gone to other markets.
Well, this used to be a market of destination, though, didn't it? People used to want,
Yes,
people wanted
well,
to
you
be
were
here.
trying to get here.
Right, and that started because Channel 4 was owned by CBS.
Yep, the
And,
1Os, yeah.
and to some degree, the salaries, particularly of the technical people in the union, they were tied together. And so you could make as much money here often as you made at WBBM in Chicago. And that's, I thought was kind of interesting, and it boosted up the salaries of everybody else.
I
It
think
brought
the
in top
turnover,
talent.
though,
Go ahead, I'm
Pardon?
sorry, Don.
I think the turnover today is because you fulfill your 2 or 3 year contract, whatever it is, and you'll be looking for more money, and they'll say, no, we'll bring in somebody else at the lower salary where you started. And that's partly responsible, maybe totally responsible for a lot of this turnover.
Do the stations, do you think, do enough community service? And by that, I mean have like there used to be each channel devoted a half hour on a Sunday or a Saturday to a show kind of like ours, like Donnybrook.
Right.
Thank goodness they don't do that anymore, because you guys are a lot wiser than we are. But do you think that would help to, kind of explain, okay, for the last week, we've been talking about these issues, be it crime or be it whatever, but maybe that doesn't necessarily have to lead the news, because we're going to talk about that in a little bit more depth. So would more time devoted to news coverage, maybe not every night, but at least sometimes during the weekend, do you
If
think
they
that
could
would
sell
help?
it, if they could sell it, if they can make a book on it, they'll put it on.
Okay.
Trust me.
I mean, how many hours are these stations running now? When we started,
Lots.
there were 2 or 3 newscasts, and then they added maybe a noon one, and then they started doing cut-ins in the morning, and now it's almost all day long.
I did 1,500 public affairs shows at Channel 2. And I think about the time I stopped, they stopped because they could sell that time as opposed to giving it away in what they called public affairs programming.
Although they're political shows. I mean, John Hancock and Mike Kelly are on every weekend on Channel 2. And then HEC, the Higher Education Channel, runs a show on Channel 11. That.
But if you go to the newscast, what you're going to get is your full dose of crime and weather. I mean, weather takes up 3 slots on most of the half-hour segments.
Even when
And
it's
they
not bad.
And sometimes they don't get it right, like
Well,
this week.
yeah, like 24 hours ago. Yeah, and meanwhile, sports is like 3.5 minutes.
I'm
And I don't
troubled-
live to
I'm
watch the
troubled
local
by that,
sports
but I'm troubled by
show. But at the same time, I'm like,
But
really?
your weekend late sports shows are 20 minutes to 30 minutes.
Right.
Okay.
On several of the stations.
All right.
And so you're getting it, but, you really do have to know where it is.
See, Betsy is younger than Don and I. We're in bed. We're in bed by then.
I was going to say to our viewers, if you were just joining us, this is Get Off My Lawn, Donnybrook. That's what we're gonna call it. But because all of us are certainly of a certain age and we've been here for a while, is there anything that is happening that gives you optimism, Donn Johnson, at this moment? And be honest. I mean, if you're not really feeling it, that's fine too.
Yeah, well, I can't say that I'm optimistic per se as to how the local news presents itself. I can't say I'm optimistic because I see too many people who get here who probably should spend 2 or 3 years in a smaller market and learn a little bit more about what they're doing, and need to learn how to use the English language. I find it just grates on me when I hear people mess up the English language. So I would like to see people, whoever runs those operations, when somebody makes a faux pas out in the field with the English language, call them in and tell them. And I'd like to see a little more personality in some of these people. Some of these people are so and I wouldn't want to call any names, but there's some of these folks I can't watch. I just can't watch them. So I would like to see some more scrutiny over who's hired and who's doing the news. Now, again, I'm with Don. We don't want to sound like, gee, we were great. You know, we had our problems, we had our growing pains. I certainly had my growing pains. So I know it takes time, but I wish they would be scrutinized a little better, who they put on the air. And if they get somebody who's got some talent, hone that person, work with that person, teach that person.
I think a lot of these young people, though, are very bright. They don't get much of a chance to show it. I really marvel at the ones today who are doing these extemporaneous field reports.
Yeah.
And they really do them very, very well. Yeah, I'm not sure that we could function very well in today's environment going out with the new technology. But, you know, it would take us a long time to learn what they do automatically.
I agree.
I consider myself something of a script-reliant
Yeah.
reporter.
Yeah.
And I could do a live shot when something was going on and do it extemporaneously. But if it was just an average live shot, I wanted a script. So my director knew the roll cues to pop up the sound clip. I wanted to be sure that it was different from the one I had done half an hour before. And you don't see that happening anymore. If you watch several newscasts in a row, it's the same version unless something has happened that they need to update it with. So the demand that you be creative and have, you know, new versions and flip the story around and maybe interest people with a different angle is pretty much gone.
Yep.
And I understand that. It's exhausting to have to do
And
that.
part of that is inexperience, too. You know, I mean, we keep going back to that these young people, God bless them, come in and are thrown out in situations and do what they can. And I think a lot of them are very smart. But they are put in tough situations and not guided, and then they're gone.
Yeah, good point. I think, too, that I want to make it clear. There are a lot of these people who are in this town that do a terrific job. I don't want to make it sound like I hate everybody who's on the air. I don't. No. I really don't. There are some I really love to look at and watch and who do a good job. There's just occasionally they put a clunker out there, and I'm saying, really? You know, I mean, that's all I can do. I mean, because I know the news directors that I worked for, the really good ones, would not have put that person on the air, at least not in that situation. Maybe would have had them get a little more training. That's just my thoughts on it.
All right, the three of you watched us lose a football team in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And here we were, however many years later, we lost a football team. Are there other issues like that you find are like
Evergreen.
You know, like, evergreen?
They just never
it
go
never
away.
goes away. It's going to come back.
Boy, I'd have to think about that for a minute. I'm not.
Well,
The basketball team. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
the basketball team, we lost the Hawks because, and let's face it, we lost the Hawks for racism and racism only. Anybody can like, oh, we're not, yeah, we were like that. That was an all-black team. They won the Western Division title, and the next year they were pulled out because Ben Kerner couldn't sell any tickets.
Yeah.
So that will be an issue that's evergreen for me, because St. Louis could support a basketball team. I mean, I did the color for the Spirits in the last year, and I know people loved what they saw, but there were certain folks in this town that didn't want to see a bunch of black guys playing basketball.
Well, it's you, me, and Jason Rosenbaum are big. This town could support an NBA
Yeah,
team.
you darn right it could.
And if I had Mr. Chaffet's telephone number, he'd hear from me daily. Like, hey, you know, you got a couple billion, don't you?
I think they're going to support a soccer team.
I think they will.
I do
I think
too.
they will.
I think
Yeah.
they
Oh,
will.
wow.
Yeah, I
Then
think
we'll
they
see.
How many times have we tried that?
Yeah,
We've had
that's
a
what
lot
I'm
of
saying.
soccer
Oh, yeah,
teams.
great guns for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then we'll see.
When you were here, and we all remember a time when St. Louis was a company headquarter town.
Oh.
And now we are sort of an outpost. You know, we're a branch office town. How much of an impact has that had? You know, when you do think of that trickle down, the business community, the sponsorships, it seems to have had a pretty significant impact.
I think it does with charity and sponsorships, and yet we've got so many new companies that the Cortex area
Right.
and
True.
development and getting the National Geospatial operation in North St. Louis. So I think there's hope, but you also don't have the corporate powers trying to manipulate things that existed when in the 80s.
And yet, when the corporate powers were manipulating things, back in the civic progress days, things happened. There was leadership in the community, and
did.
it was area-wide. It wasn't.
But you couldn't cross them, and you know,
No,
there wasn't
that's
much
true.
room for women or
yes.
probably blacks, you know,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
and who picked the political leaders.
But there was leadership, and there's not now. We've got, who's the leader of this community? It's not the mayor of St. Louis. It's not the county executive. It's not St. Charles County executive. Could you point to a leader, someone who grabs the banner
Brings
and
everybody
marches?
together.
Right.
Yeah.
There is no one like that.
Well,
And I think
I would
Civic
argue
Progress did that to a degree.
I agree with you because I would argue that if we had civic progress, even though it had many flaws, please let me understand that many of them have.
So
to
do
do
our
with race.
politicians.
Yeah, but if we had them, we might have kept the Rams.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I
We
agree.
might have kept the Rams.
Bob Hyland would have
Oh,
kept the Rams.
Yep, would never have let
Don't
them
you
go.
agree, Betsy? I mean,
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, he
He
was a
was-
powerhouse. There was no
question
doubt about it.
I thought you were going to go someplace else in talking about the corporations because I don't believe any of the local television stations are owned by any St. Louisans.
Locals,
They're
yep.
they're out of town,
Very true.
owners, and this is a problem because they don't care. They care about profit, and they care about just taking money out of St. Louis and acquiring more television stations. They don't really put it back necessarily into this community. I think that's also a problem.
I would agree with that. I think too that if we the disposal of the fairness doctrine didn't help us very much either. You know, so I won't get into that. But I think you really have a problem with stations that are all these owners are into acquiring more stations. You know, and so you got all of these TV stations all owning a lot of stations. Some even owning newspapers and so on. I mean, it used to be St. Louis was a rare situation in which Channel 5 was locally owned. Channel 4 was O&O as we called it, and Channel 2 was locally owned. You know, and they did care about the community. I'm not saying that these corporate people come in here and don't care. I do know they come in here and don't know. They don't know, and they don't know the unique situation that is St. Louis. If they did know it, they wouldn't do some of the things that they do, and they do better.
All right, Don, and Betsy, if they called you up and said like, hey, we just want you to sit in and do the 10 o'clock news for 5 days, would you do it?
Yeah, for a week.
For a week.
For a week, sure.
All right.
Especially when I don't have to carry my office with me.
Yeah, exactly.
How much you like to pay me? Huh?
Now that's up to them.
You know, I'm not kidding. I'd be in bed by 10 o'clock. No, I wouldn't want to have any part of it.
Yeah, I don't have any real interest in it either. You know, I might have an interest in a talk show because I like to run my mouth because I have a heavyweight opinion, but I'd probably be off. Well, I don't know. You can get away with a lot today that you couldn't get away with when I did have talk shows. You know.
DJ, even before Michael Brown, even before Ferguson, you know, you were one of the people who were constantly having that discussion about race. Are you optimistic? Do you see? I mean, through the efforts towards diversity in the media, at least. Are you optimistic at all?
I am optimistic.
More so than before.
And I'll tell you why. I think the people that I run into, the people that I see doing for each other across racial lines, across social lines, tells me that the message that we are all in this all together is resonating to some people's minds. I've seen minds actually changed about certain things. So. Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be a while. It probably won't be in my lifetime when it's the way I'd like it to be, the way Dr. King saw it. But I think it will happen. I think my children's children may get to experience that.
I'm optimistic knowing some of the faculty at the University of Missouri Journalism School and hearing what some of these young people are doing, just with, you know, not only being so skilled at handling the technical aspect of it, but also getting interested in depth reporting. But a lot of these kids are going to not-for-profit documentary firms and, you know, organizations that are doing investigative reporting. So, you know, I'm hoping we can build a little more focus on local reporting, but then the managers have to give you time to do it. You can't just, you know, have an hour to throw something together because it's going to be a crime story or some
Car
snazzy little, or a little feature, which is fine.
Right.
But it's not going to take any depth. It's not going to take any history. I mean, how many people knew Tom Villa?
Oh,
You know, that was
what
a
a
good
loss.
one.
What a loss.
When you said Gene McNary, I said Tom Bell.
Bell.
Right,
Yeah,
that was the
that's
first.
it,
I said, like, yeah, true.
Yeah,
I mean,
Big
like,
Tom Villa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being that I moved back to St. Louis in 1995, it was just one of those, like, I know exactly who that is and what he meant, to the city, love him, hate him. And like I said, most people don't know. And, okay, my first newspaper was in Danville, Illinois, and then I went up to Lansing and then Little Rock. But one of the first things I did when I got there was learn about the city and its history, and they just do not do that now. Now, maybe it's a time thing. They're so busy working.
It was a time thing when I was trying to get people at whatever station I was working at interested in covering politics. And I said, look, the League of Women Voters has this booklet. You could give it to every new reporter. All you have to do is copy it.
It is unfortunate
No.
that you said a time thing, because it is still a time thing, and we are out of time. But this has been glorious to have you all. We thank you so much, and I have a feeling you're going to receive some more invitations from PBS.
You can't say it, but I'll say it. Back in your day, you did do it.
They are the Mount
very kind.
Rushmore
Thank you.
of St. Louis broadcasting. Don Marsh, Betsey Bruce, the one and only Donn Johnson, thank you all for being here. And thank you for being here. Have a terrific weekend. We'll see you next Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.